Hello, welcome back. Boxer1 here, and today we're going to be looking at this. This is a bit different. I usually don't do videos on single art pieces, but this is one I made a little while ago, as in like a couple weeks, maybe a month, and it is a watercolor painting of Chureito Pagoda in Japan. And it's a very cool pagoda near Fuji. You can look it up. There's some very cool images online. It's a famous one, actually. And there's some interesting stuff that I just wanted to show, and I really liked how this painting turned out. It's the first time I used watercolor in like a large-scale painting in probably maybe 10 years. So, yeah, it's been a while, but I think it did turn out pretty good for 10 years of not doing it. But yeah, you can see I really like the background. I think the background turned out really good, and I really like the pagoda in the foreground, obviously. That's the main focus. But yeah, I really like this one. I guess I can go through what I did to actually paint it. The first thing, obviously, is finding the right colors. I did that on a test piece of paper. So I had another one of these, like a smaller version of this same type of paper. And so I used, found the colors on that, and then I transferred it to here, kind of. Basically so I didn't mess it up and make it horribly wrong. But I think it turned out pretty good. This side was a little darker on the reference photograph than the other side, so I made it darker. You can see the separation there, and I think that does give it a lot more 3D look. I would, if I were to do it again, make the yellow a little bit darker as well. It looks very similar color. It is slightly darker. I do believe I did darken it slightly. It's just not as noticeable. But yeah, I do like that. I started with the top and I worked my way down. I sketched it out of pencil first, which is why it probably looks as good. If I did this all freehand, it wouldn't. But yeah, I think it turned out pretty nice. It's not perfect, but I do think it turned out pretty nice. It also has the top. I forget what you'd call that, but yeah, I have some reflection on it using some white, which is something you usually don't want to add if you're painting. You don't want to add a lot of white except for reflection because white can actually make the color more opaque and less, watercolor-like. So you only use that for really highlights, or at least with the specific paint I got to use. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I do like how it turned out going down the pagoda. I think the colors look pretty good. The yellow, as I said, should be darker on the one side, but other than that, I think it turned out pretty good. Then we can get into the trees. The trees is actually the last part I did, so maybe we'll do the mountain first. Well, I guess we'll go in order of what I did. The sky. The sky was a very fun part. Also a very stressful part because it was the first or second thing I did. And yeah, I did just kind of a gradient pattern going down. You can see that's the only real air that's left. There was a bunch of airs over here that I managed to fix, but that's the only remnant there. But either way, I think it looks really good on this side, kind of blending down into the mountain area, which is the second part, or third part, I guess, that I did. And it looks pretty good. I actually really like how it turned out. It was a very washed out blue. That's how things get at farther distances. And so I wanted to make a good color for that. And I decided to make it a light shade first, and then just go on top of it over and over again until it got dark with like slightly darker increments of color. And I think that turned out really good. It makes it look like an actually sloping mountain, with certain sections being darker in shadow. And I think that actually did turn out pretty good for watercolor. Top of the mountain was also interesting. I actually used some white paint, not white paint, but white watercolor paint up here for the highlight of the peak, and I think that turned out pretty good. It does give the very bright look from the light coming in this direction, and I think that turned out pretty nice. Going down to the valley, which had a very nice town, or I guess city in it, yeah, it's kind of simplistic. I simplified it very much, and this color is actually not supposed to be like that color. Originally, it was a much darker, or I guess a mix of colors, but then I blended it all together by accident, and it actually turned into kind of the perfect color for it. A very washed out pale green, and I also spread that up the mountain a bit, and I think that actually really looked quite good. And yeah, if there were one thing I wanted to change, it would be kind of making it a bit more obvious what these things were, but those were buildings down there, if you can't tell, and trees. Now, talking about trees, we can get into the trees. The trees are one of my favorite parts to do in terms of like weird abstractness, and they are very abstract here. But I think you can easily tell what they are given the color and the branches and all that. I started basically with no idea of how I was going to do them. Then I just decided to put some paint down and work with it. And that's what I did. I just put a bunch of paint down and managed to get it looking like a gradient. Now, it was just a gradient of dark to like a green, and there was some green here. There was some green trees in the back, which I did after this. But to get all these like individual leaves, I simply blotted the paper with the paintbrush, with paint on it. I'll show you with a Sharpie. I kind of just did this very carefully a bunch of times, and I think it turned out pretty good. I actually think it looks very nice for an abstract, like kind of tree. And you can see there are some more trees going to the side of the temple, and I think that looks really good. Or pagoda, not a temple. Is it a temple? It's a pagoda. Whatever. This I really like. I like how that side turned out with some slightly greener, yellowy trees with some red sprinkled in. And I really like how these branches turned out. The branches are one of my favorite parts. Before I added the branches, it didn't look good. After adding the branches, I think it looked really good. And you can see there's another tree up there with the leaves not quite on it. And I think that is actually a pretty cool technique that I learned while doing this. These trees in the background were like evergreens. They were green forever. But they look really cool. I actually think they turned out pretty good. They were not really pine shaped, but they were just some other type of evergreen that was more out. It went out a bit more. But I think it turned out pretty good. I actually quite like it. And I actually quite like most of the stuff in this painting. The next thing you'll see up here is the actual name of the temple, Chureito. This, I believe, is loyalty. This is soul or spirit. And then this is pagoda. Or, yeah. But yeah, pretty cool. I actually quite like how this run turned out, as I've said like 1,000 times this video. If I make another good painting that I really like, which I probably won't do for a while, but if I do, and it's like a big scale thing that I want to show off more in depth, I'll probably do another video like this. I actually quite liked making this video, so I do hope you enjoyed as well. Kind of showing you kind of the techniques and ideas that I had for doing this. And, well, I guess the last thing I can say is I do hope you enjoyed. I shall see you next time, and goodbye.